The Downward Spiral kind of stands out, I think, from other Nine Inch Nails albums, and I've been trying to figure out why exactly. And I think one of the reasons might be because of the sound design. And this track in particular has so many elements and sounds that I think are not only musical, but really visceral. I think a lot of us have been wondering where all of these sounds come from, and I don't have answers for all of those questions. But I asked Mike James Gallagher, who is a professional sound designer in LA and host of In-Depth Sound Design. It's a really, really awesome YouTube channel, all things about sound design, usually in cinema. I asked him to talk to me about the sound design of this song and the Downward Spiral. So I'm going to include some of that conversation in this video, and then there's an extended cut with the whole conversation on my Patreon. I wanted to invite Mike, who is a Nine Inch Nails fan himself, and the sound designer for the Song Exploder series on Netflix, including that amazing episode where they interviewed Trent about Hurt, to share his perspective on the sound design and the power of it in Reptile.
What it was, and I still don't understand what it is.
So please welcome Mike James Gallagher of In-Depth Sound Design.
I think sound design is a very misunderstood term. If you search for sound design on YouTube, you might find like a lot of synth programming videos, like how to program the synth from this EDM song. Here, read this Alan Mulder quote.
Trent and Chris Vrenna had already been sampling things to create these crazy soundscapes, and most of the songs had basic structures with various ideas in place. Chris would rent movies, listen to them, and record sounds with his DAT machine. You'd never think a lot of these effects were any kind of music. But he and Trent would take a sound, do a couple things, and all of a sudden it would become this great keyboard hook, or a bass part, or a big drone. It was all extremely clever, and so when Flood and I came in, we mainly had to figure out the format for how we were going to record all the different parts.
The sounds we were using were really weird, and a lot of them were created from sound design. A lot of the songs were sound design based, like Reptile. Is all. I won't say where those sounds came from either, because I'm not giving away my secret. But I think anybody who's watched a few movies may figure it out on their own. Email me, I'll tell you if you're right. But
it shows you that sound design isn't just what they were pulling off VHS tapes. Sound design isn't just how they programmed a synth. Sound design is every decision that you make when it comes to sound. The signature sound of the Downward Spiral is that, in my opinion. Now, I know that there's lots of synth sounds and all these kinds of things, but I think what sets the Downward Spiral apart from all of his other records is how cleverly integrated that sound design that Chris Vrenna pulled, how cleverly integrated that is to all the songs.
Right.
There's so many unidentifiable, mysterious sounds in the songs, and I think a lot of them are not made by a synthesizer, and they're not made by a guitar. There's no other way these sounds would have been created than if they were pulled from a film. You wouldn't have known to create the intro sound to Reptile from scratch unless you were the sound designer for that film, creating these sounds for that sci-fi movie they were created for. And then Chris Vrenna and Trent Reznor pop along, and they're like, hey, that's a super cool sound. Let me just pop that into the intro of my song. And this whole story exists within that sound that just inherently came with the sampling of it. It makes the Downward Spiral incredibly interesting to listen to.
Do you think that the story, you said it brings the story along with it, or that sound already has that story because it was created for a specific narrative or a specific visual or scene?
Exactly.
Do you think that comes along? It can't literally, right? Because we don't have that visual and we don't have that full narrative, but we make other connections, right? You're talking about the metal, sort of that creaking kind of
Yeah, it's actually a very...
Yeah,
play it, because if you really listen to it, it's incredibly complex.
I mean, that clearly sounds like a machine to me. Some kind of machinery. Literally industrial.
Yeah.
And it also sounds really consistent, like it's on a loop, you know?
Yeah.
So that also makes me think of machinery, but I mean, not that alone doesn't make me think of machinery. It has to be coupled with metallic sounds.
Right. It's very musical as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Da-na.
I actually don't think I noticed that before because having it all isolated like that and really paying attention. I always noticed there were those high-pitched sort of... I don't know what you would call that, but yeah, those like squeaks. It's not a squeak. More like a creak or something. Yeah, that they had a pitch, but
are you talking about
so much more musical now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's metal resonance. It's
metal resonance.
Yeah.
It's also got like a kind of like there's something really like it seems like a big thing. Right? It doesn't sound like a little thing. It sounds like a big thing with like a lot of... Maybe because it's got like almost like a dull roar to it. But it also sounds kind of far away.
Right. It's smeared. It's not... There's not a lot of like... Even though there is that high-pitched metal resonance, the da-da-da, it's very rounded. It's really low-passed, where you only let the low frequencies in.
Right.
So yeah, it has high-end elements, but it's very smooth, smeared, so it sounds far away, like you're saying. There's a room tone. Yeah.
And it's so quiet. It's like...
Yeah.
And I think that, I mean, that right there adds dimension, right? Because it literally sounds far away. Like whatever it is not right in our face. It's like, you know, maybe something we're like moving towards, or it's revolving around it, or we're trying to keep our distance from it, or it's so evocative of so many things, but it feels so real.
It's interesting that you're saying that. Do we want to stay away? I mean, when you think about it, when the drum beat kicks in, those machine sounds become incredibly close.
Right.
So you have this faraway sound of metal and this machine running, which, by the way, you hear no humans. This isn't like a factory with people talking in the background. There's no humanity in this cold machine sound going on this loop, this relentless loop.
Right.
You know, it's not going to stop.
You have to lean in. You have to like lean in.
Yeah.
And then the bloop, 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 bloop is so quiet,
and again,
too.
That scent that comes in, it's sound design 101. It's just like a little lesson in contrast. It's plinky, it's high pitched, staccato on this warm, you know, what's funny, warm, I say warm but really it's kind of like cold machinery. But it's smooth, it's smeared, it's far away. These synths come in that are plinky and close.
Yeah.
It's really delicious sounding sound design. I mean, it's so pleasing to hear that.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's just like a little lesson in contrast right there. The second lesson in contrast is when that beat kicks in.
Right.
And kind of like what you were saying, I mean, I guess I never made that connection, but like, yeah, the machine's far away. Now the machine is in your face.
Totally.
And
yeah,
the
you can't
hydraulic servo sound. I don't actually know where that sound is from. I don't think anybody does. But, it's not public on the internet anywhere.
Yeah.
So we think of these big, heavy, imposing machines when we hear that sound.
Definitely sounds scary to me. That when it goes, let's see if I can find that in the stem.
Yeah.
It might take a while, but I'll let it just run until it surprises us.
Yeah, I'm surprised no one's identified that sound.
From the downward spiral? From Reptile?
From Reptile, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't been able to find that online. I've found the source of...
Exactly. It did its job. It did its job. Trent would be very pleased.
Yeah.
You're startled.
Yeah, that servo sound. So I didn't have the right word for it. I just had this like visual of like some kind of like a robotic like arm.
Yeah, I mean,
or
I think of a foot, because it almost sounds like it's walking. And it's
so that like
it's after you. Yeah. I mean, it very literally sounds like a machine is after you.
It just keeps doing it over and over again. It's a part of the drum beat, so it's so consistent. Yeah, I guess I always thought of it as an arm. That's so funny. But we both pictured like some kind of robot, right? Some kind of machine a machine that's trying to emulate humans in a way, right? But isn't, and like something that's very powerful and dangerous and could just crush your little head. And then that sound, because you have the, and it's like, so I can find it. So it's like, it's after the first step, I guess, the first footstep. There's like this.
Oh, yeah. It's kind of the snare drum.
Right. Which I want to talk to you about. I want to talk to you about how he basically made a drum beat out of like, machine sounds. And how they're like, emulating, a drum kit, kind of, roughly. Something that we're all very familiar with. That one also sounds kind of mechanical to me, but it's not in time. It kind of falters. So I don't know. Maybe I always thought of that as like fumbling footsteps or something. It
actually sounds like the machine is stuttering and stumbling.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's broken and then it comes back to life. And I mean, that definitely ties in thematically with everything. I mean, I know it's kind of weird to think of like a reptile being a mechanical beast. I mean, I don't know. Whoever the character is in the downward spiral is being relentlessly seduced and pursued by this addiction to drugs, a woman, whatever it is. But he's being seduced in a way that he is not happy with, or he is not comfortable with. And, I mean, I think, thinking about a machine that is after you, I think perfectly ties in with that. Having even that addiction show its weakness, and its weakness that it doesn't have complete control over you, but then it does again. I think it definitely ties in with all of this lyrically and sonically.
Yeah, because I was wondering about that. I don't know if I ever consciously wondered like why all these machine sounds for a song called Reptile,
right?
And why weren't these sounds in The Becoming,
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I don't know, but it's just like that might have been almost too literal. And I like how these sounds give us the opportunity to make like really interesting connections. Because, if there were just, like, those metallic machine sounds in The Becoming, it would be like, well, he's talking about becoming a machine, and so there's machine sounds. It's like, okay. That's
Two
not
on
like
the
that.
nose.
Not like that. Right. Two on the nose. It's just not like that'd be bad, but it's just more interesting.
He literally says she has the blood of reptile.
Right. She has the blood of reptile.
And when we've already, been having the feeling evoked of cold metal,
right.
Lack of humanity. I mean, when you look into reptiles' eyes, you don't see humanity there. I mean,
right. And the
same
way
thing when you look in the eyes of a machine.
move too.
Yeah,
they move very mechanically.
Yeah, they can.
It's
they
like
can.
creepy.
It's
they can
creepy.
Just freeze.
Yeah, right. Exactly. The eyes the eyes of a crocodile just poking out from under murky waters.
Right. Yeah,
hunting you, watching you. I mean, that's scary stuff.
So it's almost like, what I'm kind of picking up is like all of these sounds, I mean, there's so much depth to them and texture, right? Mm-hmm. But they all seem to be sort of contributing to this general feeling of like danger, right? Like
definitely.
There's a lot of danger feelings that that I get.
You don't want to get your
and-
hand caught in whatever that servo motor is.
Right.
You don't want to get too close.
I kind of want to talk a little bit about this other sound that comes in, but I think it's the one that goes tick, 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 and sort of the stand-in, I guess, for the hi-hat, kind of.
Right.
And it like hits, and then it lets up, and I always like imagined a taser. But I was also thinking, like, I could also picture, like, a sprinkler.
Yeah, and that's very mechanical.
But if I pictured a sprinkler, it's not scary anymore. But if I think of it as a taser or some kind of machine, like punching a hole or, whatever, then it's like...
I mean, what's interesting about that hi-hat sound is that it never happens during the servo motor sound. So
right.
It's kind of a machine-like thing where, however this machine works... Whenever that servo leg, arm lifts, whatever, and it stops, it comes down, this other valve is going off. And it's building up pressure. It's doing something to give the power to lift that leg or arm again. And
so you really hear this as like a whole mechanism.
I think that he absolutely 100% constructed it that way. And it's also a sound design kind of like mixing thing where you take different sounds and they kind of weave into each other. Like those two sounds wouldn't be effective if they were playing at the same time. So it's interesting that this like clicky, tasery valve sound is going on like a hi-hat. And then when that stops, this motor goes up and down.
Yeah. That's so true.
Yeah. So it's constructed, like the beat is constructed as if this is a machine that works in some way. That was engineered in some way. Again, kind of tying that back into the lightsaber sounds. They built this very consciously, to have this kind of built-in story behind it.
When I think of the sounds of Reptile, I think of that initial creaking noise of the metal, sort of like, right? And then I think of the tick, 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 and then I think of the like those three are like signature. So important to me in how... Yeah, just like the feeling of it.
And if you've ever heard the song live, the bass will blow your head off.
Oh, yeah, let's talk about the bass. Let's talk about that. Just vung, 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 vung.
Relentless. Again, adds to the weight of the machine and the relentlessness of the machine. And then again, I mean, I'm sure if you heard this on a really good sound system, a lot of people maybe haven't.
Right.
They've heard it on their earbuds or whatever. But gosh, if you hear this on a really good sound system, the bass is relentless. If you've heard it live, I mean, I think he probably added another layer of low frequencies in. It's insane. I mean, with the two songs, there were two songs that like I walked away from one of the shows just like completely blown away by, and one of them was Reptile. And it was because there's no other song that he plays live that is like that. So it's really one of the signature sounds of the song.
And I agree with you that it does add to the machinery, the machine itself or the robot, because it sounds to me, there's something about it that sounds almost like a low machine hum. But just like really pulsing. Fast, but like a fan, right? That's what I was thinking. Like,
sure.
Like a big fan, or some big pulsing. Just I don't know. I don't know enough about machinery to really speak intelligently about it, but just like vroom, 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 vroom. Like I don't want to get near that fan. I don't want to get sucked into that fan.
Right,
I don't want to. Whatever is powering, like whatever this is cooling, must be extremely powerful. I mean, I don't know if I've ever literally gone this far into thinking about like what specifically each of these sounds like to me, but this has all been going on unconsciously, right? In the background, it's all been subliminal. I think you said primal in the beginning, right? It just it's turning on certain little areas in my brain, like without me really realizing, reminding me of things I've heard. Obviously that lizard part of our brain that fear, flight, fight, and I can't say the fourth one, but it's like, well, I won't. But it's like these really primal survival mechanisms, and I feel like that part of my brain is getting set off by Trent Reznor all the time. Is there a bowed metal sound in Reptile?
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite sounds on the entire album. It's that gong sound. And it's on the stems, on the Reptile stems. It completely by itself. Okay, so I'm not going to say that this is absolutely bowed metal, but it definitely evokes the sound of metal, and in the way that it just kind of like it's drawn out. It kind of sounds like it's got it. There's no attack, so it kind of makes it sound like it's bowed. What's interesting to me,
bowed, like with like a violin bow.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Bowed.
I have no. I have no idea what the sound is. I don't think anyone's ever identified it, but I can almost guarantee you that these are VHS sounds.
Oh my gosh. Okay, let's listen to it. I agree with you. At least that big gong sound.
Yeah, at least the big
Maybe
gong.
not the ring,
what is that?
And the
But what's that? Like, that sounds crazy.
Yeah.
It's like this sucking sound.
Which one?
The
sucking? Yeah, those have more fidelity, I feel like. And there's like almost a cymbal crash or something.
Yeah.
Which I never heard before.
Yeah. Play it again.
Yeah.
It's so damn cool.
That's so cool.
It sounds like that gong sound is moving into those sucking sounds.
They sound like some mechanism.
Yeah, sort of. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of what we do in film sound design as well, where we'll take two unrelated sounds, but if we have them work together, they make this new thing.
I do agree that it sounds so cinematic. I don't even know. Yeah, like bowed metal maybe, but it reminds me almost of like an old sci-fi movie or even a thriller, actually. For some reason I'm picturing like Star Trek or something, but like where like or like the Twilight Zone maybe. Something like horrible has just happened. Somebody's just like realized something horrible.
Yeah.
And there's like zooms in on them and it's like, nah.
Yeah.
Or something, right? And then he like pitches it down, so he's got it, nah, and then, nah,
and it's so
tritone.
clearly pitched down.
Yeah.
In a sampler.
Yeah.
It's so dramatic.
Dramatic,
huge and massive, and it's so cool.
Yeah, it's massive, right? It is. It's absolutely massive. It's so menacing. Here's how it develops later in the song. I'm curious. So this part. I could listen to that all day.
So awesome. Yeah, it's really interesting because, again, like with the contrast thing, that breakdown is very, very sentimental. It's the first time I think we hear anything that sounds close to pity or that we care, about anything. It sounds delicate, fragile. And yeah, that piano and the pads that come in that are building up, they just sound so like emotional. And then that comes in. It's destroyed, like absolutely destroyed. But yeah, it's really cool. I mean, you hear this sample of the vulnerable sounding woman. That's a really good example of, it's from that scene in Texas Chainsaw Massacre where they're just like walking down a hill. It sounds like that woman is in it sounds like she's in much worse distress in the song. Right. But but if you take it out of context, it has that mood. In the movie, that mood isn't actually happening at that moment. But that's a really good sound design thing where you take things out of context. And we kind of touched on that earlier. But it doesn't matter what the sound is that you're using. It matters like what is it evoking? What's it doing for you? Is it, so that's a really good example.
Yeah. That is a cool example.
But
it does sound like they messed with it too. They like chopped it up.
Just a little bit,
so it's amazing actually how they chopped it up. And I haven't listened to it in a lot of detail yet, but just like my initial impression is it always sounded to me like this woman was like crying and she was like choking up like there was like these inhales where when I hear the original sample it doesn't sound like that at all. It just sounds like she's just like so the way that they spliced these little the samples of the sample together, it literally sounds like somebody inhaling. And I was like, they had to know, right? I mean, they had to know when they got to that, like, well, that sounds tragic, like, or that sounds
it sounds like involuntary, like she's like you're saying, like she's kind of choking. That really creeped me out when I was younger. That's the thing, is how unidentifiable it is. You don't know if it's like a little girl or if it's a woman. It's very strange. So and that's what's so cool about not having the visual to go by, is that it's really whatever horrible thing you're imagining is,
I was going to say, I think that's part of why I love instrumental music so much, is because there's so much left up to interpretation, and there's such a rich visual world that goes on for me when I'm listening to music, and to not have any words to like be in conflict with what I'm, not to say obviously this song obviously has lyrics, but like a section like that, there's no lyrics and it's just me and the sounds, and it's like anything could happen. It could mean anything.
With sound design, talking about doing it in film, talking about doing sound design in cinema, you're not always trying to manipulate someone's emotions in some certain way. You're just trying to make it feel right. You're trying to make it be satisfying, interesting, immersive. That's a huge one.
Yes.
And I think it's a huge one with the Downward Spiral. I think the Downward Spiral is so immersive. He knows how to nail a mood and stay there, or go somewhere else, but like in the most perfect way possible. The other parallel between the Downward Spiral and film sound design is that Trent Reznor is very much the director of the Downward Spiral. And that's not the case when you think of a lot of albums. I mean, film is a director's medium, and we all know when we read the liner notes of Nine Inch Nails albums that Trent Reznor is Nine Inch Nails. And it's the singular, meticulous vision of Trent Reznor.